Well, good. Welcome to all who are flocking to this meeting. It's not a meeting, really. It's a chat with somebody who's a very important man. He's a columnist, a newspaper columnist. He's an educator. He's a political activist, you might say. And he is Chris Donnelly. And his father was a good friend of mine. How are you doing, Chris?
All good, Jude. It's good to see you and Pat
Oh,
now, I have to say. Hope you're both
hi.
keeping
And
well.
thank you for giving
Thank you.
yourself your time because I know you're a terribly busy guy.
No, I always make time for you two now.
Okay, you're a good man. Okay.
He's
Um,
also a very good politician with an answer like that, by the way, Jude.
Okay, well, listen, I'll start the ball rolling because we want to talk about essentially a border poll or what the implications of it before a border poll, the implications after. You, Chris, are a key figure in Ireland's future. What do you think that body has achieved to date? What's the most important things it has achieved?
Well, firstly, I'd say that there are people who are more key than me in Ireland's future. A lot of people, Niall Murphy and Jerry Carlisle, amongst others, have spent a lot of time really pushing the agenda forward, which I think has been very good, very positive in terms of ensuring engagement, both sides of the Atlantic too, because I know a lot of good work was done engaging with Irish America over the last number of months, which I do think is actually going to be very important, Jude. If we look at our history, we know the really the central role Irish America has played throughout Irish history in supporting those who are interested in pursuing Irish independence. And I can envisage the closer we get to a border poll, the necessity of having friends outside of Ireland because I just think things are changing so quickly politically. Who would have thought? But you could potentially be looking at a Farage-led British government at some point, the way things are at the moment. And
Yes.
and you know, we might have scoffed at that years ago, but that was before Trump's first term, never
Uh,
mind his second term. So all things are possible. So I think Ireland's future has been important in internationalizing, but also I think in really riding the crest of the wave. I think so much has changed. I would do one of the things I'm doing for Ireland's future at the moment is I'm doing kind of regular presentations, just outlining what we're about with Gales Lakela, who I think are also very positive what they're doing, engaging the GAA community to really provoke more conversations, ensure that the issue remains relevant and involve people. But I've been going around different GAA clubs, and I tend to start the presentation by saying it's just 9 years since I was in Clough when I did a lighthouse. I think I forget the lighthouse summer school.
uh,
I think I'd approached John Manley of the Irish News and said it'd be nice to get a presentation. Let's get a few politicians. And if I remember, Jude, you went down with my dad
that's right.
to one, maybe for the 2 years, but we ran it. 1 year was before Brexit. I think the other one maybe, or maybe they were both immediately after Brexit. I'm not sure because it's getting really. But the
Okay.
point was at that time, if you remember, the nationalist vote was actually receding in the north. Uh, the DUP had a great 2016 Assembly election campaign. There was the narrative abound, and I thought it was foolish at the time, and I said so was, but that our nationalists aren't interested in Irish Union anymore. They're kind of looking past that. The Northern Irish is the new identity people are interested in.
Yeah.
And the thing that I was saying at that Lighthouse Summer School and really writing about it at that time was that was a misread. It was a fundamental misread of what was happening.
Chris, can I
Nationalism
interrupt
was
you? Chris, can I ask you, why did you think, like a lot of people didn't catch on to that Brexit would make the difference that it has? Why did you say that back then?
well. Firstly, what I was saying before that was that nationalism were disillusioned with the
Yeah.
way devolution was panning out. People thought that it wasn't delivering, that really Sinn Féin's overtures were not being reciprocated. And the generation that was coming through was one that was really all for peace, but was more stridently assertive and confident in their identity. And they didn't believe that it was really being reflected in what was being achieved
And Chris,
politically.
but hold on a second. Chris, was it Brexit being the catalyst, or was it Sinn Féin's non-delivery and disillusionment of the
Well,
Sinn Féin voter? Which was it?
the disillusionment, Pat, preceded Brexit. The disillusionment was apparent from like 2009, 10. For years, conversations I was having with Sinn Féin people and many others saying, look, this is going nowhere. Stormont's going nowhere at the moment. And really what that culminated in was they realized themselves around the RHI when, the most popular thing that was done was Martin McGuinness bringing down the institutions.
Yeah.
And really what you had then was people said, yes, finally someone is capturing our mood, that this is unacceptable. We should be aspiring for better. And you brought into the mix then Brexit too. And people lifted their heads, Pat, and said, look, we want something better. And that really, I think, galvanized more the push to say, why are we not being more assertive, more confident, more ambitious in saying we need to actually start discussing the issue of unity in a credible way now, in the present tense. So and if you look at what's happened since then, what's really been interesting is how outside of us, who would constitute the Northern Nationalists, you have got engagement from players within the Southern political mainstream, but also the Southern commentariat, people like David McWilliams and others who bring it to a different level, because whereas me and you two guys can be pigeonholed and said, that's the noisy Northern nationalist on about unity again, it's harder to do that to David McWilliams, Jim O'Callaghan, or Leo Varadkar.
Would you say that your job, or really the job of Ireland's future, was to sort of awaken people, get them talking about it, or did you have a specific purpose? Were you wanting them to put forward ideas about what needs to be done before any border poll?
I think it's a bit of both, probably, Jude. It's more that we do not have yet the political clout where it needs to be in Dublin to actually professionalize preparations for unity.
Well, what things are you thinking of there? What things are you thinking of?
Sorry?
What are you thinking of when you say you don't have the political clout?
Well, we've yet to get those of us who are interested in really pushing this to the next level, which is getting the message out across Ireland and beyond that the planning and preparations are at the level where the Irish government is engaged, where there are people whose 9-to-5 job, Jude, is to be involved in a civil service, which is looking at the statistics, analysis, the comparative figures, whether it's economy, education, environment, all of the areas, health, and actually articulating policy, see where the strengths are, the weaknesses. That can be done, that can best be done by the machine of government.
Yes,
and
exactly.
where I think we need to get to, and I think it's accepted across the board, is we need a government in Dublin that says, right, we are taking on board that as part of our government realm, a part of what we do. Micheál Martin's not the man to do it. My hope would be that his replacement in Fianna Fáil might be more amenable to it, or that Fine Gael. Certainly, I think Sinn Féin would be willing to do it. I think some of the smaller parties, Labour, I think had in some of their, if I'm not mistaken, in the last manifesto. So it's more that we need to get the two other main players apart from Sinn Féin in Dublin now to take that final step.
So what do you mean by that final step? What do you want them to do? Do you want them to set up a citizens' assembly? Do you want them to have some sort of framework as to how a future Ireland would look, or what?
I think that, if I look at Scotland, where they prepared the very bulky document, which is based on facts and figures and statistics, that is what you're talking about, Jude. That's what I want the Irish government to be involved in. Now, they're not the only ones. You have, the ESRI are producing great work at the moment. You have others doing the same. You have political parties doing bite-sized things. But the machinery of government, Jude, can do a lot more. Because, as I say, it's getting the professional civil servants who have expertise in these different fields, looking at it at the field of economy, education, health, transport, and planning, and then bringing that into, really, that would help shape where you're going to go in terms of putting a pitch to say, what do we want unity to look like in the short term? And by the way, I'm one of these people that thinks that it's going to be a longer process. What I mean by that is, it's one thing having a border poll, but the day after a border poll is won, I think begins a new phase, which is going to be a transitional phase. Because you can't go from one to the other too quickly the nature of Irish history. It's about, and that's where I think Brendan O'Leary, sorry, is very interesting in this, where he talks about, do you try to put to the voters, here is the shape of a united Ireland? Because the problem with doing that is you're not going to get unionists to engage in the conversation of what the shape of united Ireland is until they've actually had to resign themselves to the fact that sovereignty is transferring to an all-Ireland basis.
So you're saying have to wait until the Unionists see that it's inevitable or give some sort of a signal of assent before we can have a border poll?
No. You picked me up wrong. What Brendan O'Leary writes about, I think it's very interesting, is do you have the vote first to say, look, we are moving to United Ireland? Because up to that moment, and by the way, that vote should happen once it is believed it is, it can be won. Not contingent upon Unionists saying, well, we don't want it because we don't want United Ireland. No, that's not it. The idea, Jude, is if you think back to 1998, the Good Friday Agreement discussions, it was always going to be the case that when the political parties sat around the table to thrash out what the institutions and the constitutional framework would look like, what they were really discussing was how would the north of Ireland continue to exist within UK sovereignty. That was always going to be the basis.
Yeah. So you're saying the same thing is going to happen in a united Ireland?
What I'm saying is there's a conundrum. Do you try to engage with certain elements of unionism who would say ahead of a border poll, look, here is how we would present a model of what a united Ireland could look like, and get people to vote on that? Or do you say, look, the first thing we do is, do we move to United Ireland or not? And if the vote is yes, then you have all party negotiations, including governments, to say, well, that's done and dusted. The conversation has been had. We've moved to United Ireland. How do we then resolve the three-stranded relationship within it? So there are advantages and disadvantages to both, Jude, which I find quite interesting.
Yeah. Do you see then? Sorry, Pat, I'm hogging the question.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say.
No, it was going through my head. I was reading a book, and I was mentioned to Jude there last week. Dr. Cormac Moore, he wrote The Root of All Evil, was about the
Boundary Commission.
Boundary Commission. And one of the things that was done there was was a representative from the south, a representative from the north, and the chairman was British. And it was one of the stupidest things ever, because right from the start, the chairman loaded the thing pro-Britain. Now, look at the very, very starting point about a border poll. It's so woolly and the Good Friday Agreement. Whenever the Secretary of State should decide, whenever he should decide, by the way, even the pronoun could be out of date. And is that a very weak, woolly point to start this whole discussion about, can Britain kick the can down the road about holding a border poll for the next 20, 30 years before we even get there?
Okay, can I get a supplementary to that? Do you not think, Chris, that the two big parties, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael in the south, will kick the can for as long as they possibly can, because they don't want this sort of tidy little deal they've been working for the last century to be shattered, which it will be if there's United Ireland?
Yeah, I would take Pat's first. Trying to remember. Oh, yeah. Yes, I have no doubt, Pat. And one of the reasons I started this by saying the importance of Ireland's future, trying to internationalise, trying to get additional clout, ensure that that's involved, is because we know that at every stage of Irish history, we have needed and tried to call upon outside external pressure to ensure that those who might always be at it, as we might say, are not at it in the future. But Pat, rest assured, they will be at it. We know that. Now, what I find interesting about that proposition, which I do think will come to fruition, is what would be the response if we see electorally nationalism collectively moving in front of unionism, and the sense that the non-aligned bloc certainly would be at least half and half or more in favour of unity.
Yeah.
If the British government continues to, refuse to drag its feet, well, knowing nationalists as I do, that's only going to be a galvanizing factor to say this is a denial of democracy. That's going to be something that leads to agitation protests within Ireland and outside of Ireland. I have no doubt, Pat, that's probably going to happen. But what I would suggest to you is that might be actually something, ironically, that helps to galvanize and add further credence to the movement for constitutional change. Taking Jude's point about Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, I think there's a number of things that we need to get our heads around in the North. And some people don't like this, right? But yes, I agree with the first proposition. The thing you're saying is that Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil and the entire southern political class, it has been an established entity for over 100 years. If you compare the Republic of Ireland to other post-colonial societies across the world 100 years later, it's an unprecedented success. If you look at it on an economic basis, if you look at it successfully, educationally, in so many other ways, sure, it's got problems. The housing crisis is a massive problem. But if you look at where it is, a mere 100 years after Ireland went through in its history, compared to so many other societies. So the reason I'm prefacing by saying that is there is undoubtedly going to be a conservative instinct of people who are going to say, we have had something that's worked for so long. Do we want the basket case of the North to come in and wreck what's working? Sometimes, Jude, it's presented as if, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, they're just selfishly wanting to protect what they want. I think we have to be a bit, look, these are our fellow countrymen and women. Many good people across Ireland would support all the different political parties. So what I'm going to say is, I think that whenever we get to the nuts and bolts of thrashing out what a united Ireland is going to look like, do not be surprised if people within the South, not just at the political class, but at other levels, say, we'll see those arrangements that exist at the moment, this three-stranded relationship. We kind of like that, because the three-stranded relationship says a lot of the parity of esteem, constitutional contentious issues are confined within the contested entity that is the 6 counties, the North. You then have an east-west thing, which involves politicians being elected from the North to sit in Westminster. Now, if you think about it this way, Jude, how does that at the moment in any way impact upon the British political class? I mean, there's not even the smallest level of concession to the North. How small would it be to say, you see those politicians elected in the North of Ireland, they shouldn't have to say an oath of loyalty to the British monarch.
But
they can't even do that. They won't even be willing to do that.
Yeah, so, but Chris, you're putting all your weight on what's the situation in Britain with regard to a border poll. I'm saying if we judge by their actions or inaction, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil do not want a border poll. They'll say maybe someday, and yes, and we'll have this. What is the organisation that Micheál Martin's busily
shared
island? Yes. Is it not clear that something will have to be done to get them on board in terms of Irish unity or even a border poll?
Absolutely, and I think that's kind of where we're at the moment. And I think there are voices within both of those parties. Certainly not Micheál Martin. Micheál Martin's a write-off as far as this conversation is concerned. Micheál Martin is considering himself, I think that he is driven by an anti-republicanism. That's part of it. Yeah. Anti-Sinn Féin. And therefore, everything he sees to do with Irish unity and a campaign for border poll, he dismisses as Sinn Féin. I mean, you saw something ridiculous there. Was it an ESRI report came out and he used a really scathing term? I forget what it was to describe. It was very demeaning. It was absolutely ridiculous, but it shows how cutting the man is around. So Micheál's a write-off, but he's not going to be around for much longer in terms of the role as Taoiseach.
But do you think it'll be a big change then if somebody to play?
Well, I am more interested in looking to see, are the others more amenable, whether it's Jim O'Callaghan or other figures, whether some of them say, listen, either you're going to be on the right side of history in terms of having a role in turning the page to the next chapter, because Micheál Martin's legacy is going to be that he didn't. Now, Leo Varadkar, some might say, a bit late because he wasn't, not when his Taoiseach. But I would be a little more. I would be a little more forgiving in that regard, because there was a clear and present danger of COVID, which was a big thing, and Brexit, that Leo Varadkar was a significant player involved in during the times that he was at the helm of the Irish government. But I think that, listen to what he is saying, listen to what others are saying, listen to even, I think, some of the nuance of Jim O'Callaghan. I think others within Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil know that the next step has to be taken, certainly over the next number of years. And when that step is taken, it is a step change in terms of planning and preparation, which means that there is a more serious basis upon which a campaign to secure a date for a border poll can be
Chris,
done.
can I ask, can you go down to a wee bit to the granular level? Would you, and I'm asking you personally, but maybe you can answer it a different way. Are you in favour of a sort of a devolved government, or it has to be a unitary parliament? Say something like changes to the national anthem. What about the tricolour? These are all questions that myself and Jude have discussed these before. But no, and Jude made the point earlier on, so I'm going back on it. Why is the Dublin government running away from holding citizens' assemblies where these things can be discussed in a sort of a policy forum?
Okay, for the first one, I'm going to give you a phrase which I've started to use and I will continue to use. The precedent is the principle. Now,
what does that mean?
Here's what it means. At what time since the creation of the Northern Ireland state did the United Kingdom change its flag and its national anthem? At what time did they consider it? At what time has a unionist politician or commentator come on the airwaves, come on the radio, read a column saying, you know what it is, to make people in the contested entity as the North of Ireland feel more accommodated, we should be doing these two things? It's never happened. So, and I had this discussion a number of months ago. Well, here's why I'm saying that. I'm not against a conversation to do either of the two things you're talking about. But the holding of that conversation in and of itself, Pat, needs to be recognized as a very conciliatory gesture. Instead, the manner in which it is framed too often is, well, you cannot possibly discuss Irish unity unless you are willing to do A, B, C, D, and E. So really, there needs to be a change to how things are framed to recognize that none of so many things that are being demanded as the basic step in which we could possibly have a United Ireland, none of them happened. And me, you, and Jude are sitting here in the United Kingdom right now. So we need to have that conversation, and we need to change the basis upon which that conversation is held. That's me. I think not everyone's looking at it that way, but I think that is important, because too often there is an attempt to say people aren't serious about Irish unity because they won't rip down the tricolour.
Well,
no one has ever ripped down the United Kingdom's flag.
Yeah. Well, let's look at the situation if, in fact, I was a unionist. And you're asking me to stop being a unionist and to become a citizen of a United Ireland. Some of them have said, and I think they've got a degree of logic behind it, I'll no longer be a unionist. I won't. I'm for a union with Britain. I want to be part of as we are at present.
They'll be no longer British, Jude.
The UK. So if you bring me into United Ireland, what's the point in me talking about being a unionist? The union is broken. So is that not the central sort of bare conundrum that you're faced with?
But here's the issue. People have accepted that whether we are in the United Kingdom or United Ireland, that me, you, and Pat are Irish citizens. We're Irish. I'm not British. No part of my identity is British. I might be a British subject in terms of legal status. But we have also said that in United Ireland, that we would recognize and continue to recognize the Britishness of unionists. Now, I understand what you're saying. There's a potential existential crisis almost to say, well, the union
hold on a minute, Chris. You just said 2 minutes ago, and it's a brilliant phrase, by the way, the precedent is the principle. You're just contradicting yourself answering Jude now.
No, I'm saying we have accepted through the Good Friday Agreement that whether we are in the United Kingdom sovereignty-wise or in the United Ireland sovereignty-wise, that the three of us are recognised as Irish and our neighbours are recognised as British. So we have to honour that obligation, the other side. Now, granted, Jude, I do think that there might be conversations amongst people who are unionists to say, are we looking at a new realm here of is there actually a union? Whether there is or not, we have to be sincere and say, look, if people self-describe themselves as British, then the sovereign arrangements have to recognize that. Now, how that manifests itself in an institutional way is more complicated. Could you give to the north of Ireland some special relationship within the Commonwealth? See, that's another thing that I have an issue with. This notion, if you remember the conversation I had earlier, and by the way, let me say this, I am very open to changing the Irish national flag. But I do think people have to have the conversation on the right basis and recognize that that isn't a demand. That is a massive conciliatory gesture and one that was never offered in the other way. So, yeah. But in terms of how do we recognize the Britishness of Unionist United Ireland? Well, some of that is for the British government to say, what are they willing to do? Are they willing, for instance, and I do think this idea of the whole United Ireland joining the Commonwealth, I think that's for the birds. I think we say that the Strand, one institution, the North, which, we might not have 11 local government councils. We might have Stormont as a glorified local government council, which would still be smaller than Dublin Council, probably, in terms of the rateable size of it, But I think that we would look at that type of scenario to say, does the North take on a certain status within the Commonwealth? There'd be certain things like that people could look at. Certain status in terms of relationship of people, peers elected to the House of Lords, appointed, not elected, sorry, House of Lords. I think you're into that scenario. But see, sometimes, Jude, people throw out, we're going to make sure that there's 3 places secured around the cabinet table for unionists. I think that's all nonsense. Okay. How do you say that you're going to have, the cabinet table is the sovereign government for Ireland as a whole. At no time around, did the British Parliament say that people within the north of Ireland would have guaranteed places in the British cabinet? It's not. I mean, we in the north have to get our heads around this. The Irish sovereign state is an equal on an international stage with the United Kingdom. And too often it's presented as if the north and south are equals. No, they're not.
No, they're not. Well, I think most of us would accept that, but do you think that the unionists you'd get movement from a body of unionists if you said, well, for at least a period of whatever, decades maybe, that we would have Stormont running still as a subsidiary or a local government grouping, maybe even the same kind of thing?
I think it's a racing certainty, Jude, that happens, because there has to be recognition of the 3 strands. The 3 strands was the basis of which we had a Good Friday Agreement. And the conservative instinct that is going to be within people in the southern political establishment is going to be to say, look, we need to phase you guys in, okay? Because there's been a lot of trouble up there. So the best way to phase you guys in is maybe we can and see, to be honest, I think that those of us interested in Irish unity, it is actually in our interest to have the difficult conversation and resolve it now about the institution, the troublesome institution that is Stormont, and how the dysfunctional way that it operates. It would actually benefit us to say, listen, the veto system that exists is not conducive to good governments this side of United Ireland, and it's not conducive to it the other side of United Ireland. So it would be better to have that subsidiary level of government as a local government institution in place, within which the parity of esteem that is built into the Good Friday Agreement is acknowledged. You see, parity of esteem doesn't hold today on a United Kingdom basis. We don't go over to Westminster and dictate anything. And it's what I would want the Irish government to offer more to unionists than what the United Kingdom government has ever offered us. But we can't allow a situation in which unionists can essentially bring the paralysis of Stormont down to Leinster House.
We're nearly 5 minutes left now, so let's go to the
could it be the other way around? You know the old joke that partition failed in the north but succeeded in the south? Jude alluded to it earlier on, and you mentioned the point like Michael Martin's a dead loss in regard. So could it be that the real fight would be to convince the people of the Republic to support unity?
I don't think, I think that you would find people are very aware of their history across this country. I think you'd find institutions like the GAA would be fully on board. I think you'd find every major political party and minor political party on board. I think you'd find the church on board. I think that, and I think that Ireland is not England.
At what
I see a
stage
lot of,
would you see them
what I
on
mean by
board,
that is
Chris?
institutions have lost a lot of respect and, you know, fragment in America and in England. In Ireland, there's still that base for that. But also, I think most importantly, Pat, I think that the concerns that you're alluding to that will be in place in the South will be addressed by the manner in which the proposition is put forward. In other words, that if you have a multi-layered, which matches the three strand, it means that, you know, that a lot of those concerns that the North's politics has brought South, they're allayed to the Southern electorate from the offset.
Okay, Chris, when do you think, or to what extent do you think reconciliation needs to be occurred before the border poll is called? Or do you think that setting a date is a good idea and that it'll concentrate minds and the reconciliation might be something that'll happen post the election?
Well, I think and one thing I loathe is the way that this has been allowed to cynically be used, Jude, as if to say somehow that people like me in Ireland's Future and others that were talking Irish unity were acting detrimental to community relations and polarizing and almost against reconciliation. I think that firstly, whether someone is in favor of the Union continuing or United Ireland, they should be treated equally with respect. And all should want to have a more reconciled society in the north of Ireland. That is a given. Doesn't matter. Today, I want a more reconciled society. I've always wanted it. And we've always, as far as my life's concerned, had the north of Ireland within the United Kingdom in a sovereignty sense. So whatever we're about, reconciliation has to be a part of it. If I'm looking globally, Jude, with a historical political analysis head on, I would say this to you. I think that the framework within which Ireland will evolve to be the most settled, reconciled society will be the generation after Irish unity is achieved. Because if you look at it, I think the great mistake of Irish history was gifting to the Unionists of the North their own state.
Okay.
Because it was gifting to a paranoid minority, a privileged minority caste, something that they could not cope with, and which was what we have, we hold. Yeah. Whereas if you look at the way that the minority within the south of Ireland has managed to be assimilated and be respected over a century, and even if you look at the contrast, Jude, at how nationalist majority communities within the north were quicker to embrace power sharing at local government, with the nationalist majority communities in the north, even to this day, can accommodate rather raw expressions of unionist identity, like loyalist paramilitary aligned bands marching to the centre of Derry and Newry. But we don't get worked up. We respect that, even though we know that the reciprocal would not be happening in Cumber or Bangor or Hillsborough. Hell, you can't even get kids to play together.
One minute, sorry, Chris, we have 1 minute left. Go ahead, Pat.
No, I noticed you getting very nervous there, and I didn't want to interrupt Chris. Chris, all I can say is thanks very much for your time. Really, genuinely appreciate it, and it's very, very informative.
I have one final question for you, and it's just a single sentence, not even a sentence, a phrase. Would you be in favour of 2030 as a deadline for border poll, or would you leave it?
I can understand, Jude, why a lot of people, probably incensed by what they sense, what Pat was talking about earlier, that giving the British government the control of setting the date, a lot of people are quite anxious about that and want to lay down a marker. I can understand that. I'd say at my point, I'm a bit more relaxed about it. I can allow slippage because I think it's very clear we're moving in a certain direction.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Chris.
Great talking to you too.
There's so many things I want to ask you about, but you've really given us a lot of stuff.
Sure, we can do it again sometime.
Indeed, we will. Indeed, we will. Okay,
Look
thanks
forward
very
to
much.
it.
Thanks,
Thanks,
All the
Pat.
best now.
Thank you.